So, 5 games, 5 goals in the first week of the League of Ireland, returning an average wait of over 72 minutes in each game for a goal. We had a storm, we had Bohs Rovers, we had a scatter of new players. We're back, Dan.
Yeah, back, John.
Wasn't it great to be back?
It was. You went to Pat's on Friday?
I did. I went to Pat's Waterford. I would have gone to Bohs Rovers. That was obviously moved. Went along to Inchicore. Big crowd.
You convinced your better half to go along with you?
Brought the girlfriend for the first and last time to League of Ireland.
She didn't know
game.
any of the players, but then neither some of the Waterford players, to
No,
be fair.
I tell you what, she couldn't get over the language of the audience. She couldn't, like, God almighty, these League of Ireland fans.
Yeah.
Roaring abuse at the referee.
Don't get much of that in Rathgar, to be fair.
Nor at a rugby game.
No.
But it was her first.
Unless it's a school's rugby game, of
Unless
course.
the school, you know.
To be clear.
My dad and your dad and all that. But yeah, it was an interesting game. It was an interesting open to the season. Rennie against Rennie. Rennie up front for Pats. Rennie bringing in all these loanee players for Waterford, and Waterford getting the win.
Yeah, that was probably one of the big results of the weekend, I think, Waterford, considering...
It was.
Like, you know, there's two ways of looking at it. A team with 8 debutants, some of them who genuinely didn't know each other. I think he said, as we move on to our talking points, I think it would be one of the weekend highs. It would be like Brian Murphy's return, but the fact that I think through John O'Shea, he got two defenders in from Reading during the week. Who is, do you know, sometimes you might play like 5-a-side or something and you don't know someone's name on your team, but you know you have some sort of understanding with them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't. I mean, do you stop it and break a play and go, sorry, what's her name again, by the way? But they managed to get through it.
I made a point of this actually on Twitter. I was like, the League of Ireland has brought in a lot of loanee players now. That's sort of by necessity, but the two lads that Waterford had, they were very, very good. I mean, they were clearly good players, and Rennie admitted afterwards he really didn't know much about them, but needs must, he had to cobble a squad together. It's been an interesting kind of, I suppose, feature of the early games, all these players on loan coming from England. Yeah,
like I think that would have been one of the more interesting aspects of the opening weekend for me, is just interesting new players coming into the league. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. That, you know, there are actually, and Declan Devine made this point after the game I was at on Friday, Dundalk and Derry, that when he brought in a number of players from outside, and including a guy on loan from Hull who did a very good job on Michael Duffy, Danny Lupano, but he was saying under 23s football in England is rubbish. And that
he didn't hold back after the game.
Basically, that, you know, clubs are actively ringing Derry and other clubs, you would assume, to take their players, to give them an opportunity for them to play.
So they're ringing the Irish clubs rather than vice versa.
Yeah, you know, we have someone here, we haven't had the opportunity to see them play first team football because they can't break into our team, but can you take them for a while? Now, that's good, but the flip side of that is there are still national underage leagues here. And it's the guys who get to under 19 level there, maybe aren't ready for the jump, are being replaced by people coming in. So it's almost like, it's like a food chain. So where did they go for games? Is it the first division or what? Like, what? They're in a sort of a slight limbo. So that's one of the downsides of it. But I think for supporters, I think for other players, just rather than being the same faces on the merry-go-round, to have some new players, some exotic characters coming in from different leagues, different cultures, I think it probably is needed. Now, Hull wouldn't be the most exotic place in the world. But
have you been to Hull?
I have not had the pleasure, no. But I gather it's a nice place to visit.
Indeed. We have Shane Supple on for part 2 of the show. Obviously, we are on TV, we're on YouTube, and we're on the old podcast medium. But obviously, Dan, the main talking point was Bohs and Rovers. This was one of the games that involved a very, very scruffy goal. There were 5 goals. They were all 4 of them were very scruffy. Massey's wasn't too bad, but Stephen Bradley obviously looking very happy after the win. And crucially for Rovers, they did this last season. Now, they didn't go on from this maybe later in the season, but they got a late winner in week 1, which I think will be a big boost to them.
Well, look, it's on our list as daily event debacle. So really, you can talk about the game all you want, but I just thought as an opening weekend highlight, it was pretty disappointing. Now, you know, there's the mud-splattered celebrations from Aaron Green, but the game couldn't be televised live because of the weather. I mean, it shouldn't have been moved from Friday night in the first place. I know a lot of people were looking forward to watching it on Saturday. They couldn't. You know, there was a couple of security-related incidents after the game, which sort of showed that really moving it from Friday night to Saturday afternoon didn't really make any difference in terms of the, I don't know, the safety or any issues arising from that. So, I don't know, like, I thought the opening weekend, truth be told, was a bit flat. And I think this this so-called highlight game being moved around and shunted around, and then arguably you could even argue could have gone ahead. It wasn't ideal. There's the dugouts there. There was high winds before the game.
Under 17s
they were using under 17 players as make weights. This was the replacement dugout. Now I must say, when the game started, like, it was playable. It's fine.
But it got worse.
But you sort of wonder, if we didn't have such a congested fixture schedule coming down the line, would the authorities decided, listen, we can't show this on TV. Could we maybe just hold this one off? I mean, there's not a massive travel inconvenience aspects with it. It's not as if one team has come from Cork or come from Dundalk or whatever. You know, it's supporters have had short journeys to make, and I think I left home around 12:30 for a 2 p.m. kickoff, nearly thinking it wouldn't have gone ahead. And you know, the wind, the elements. I mean, I love those derbies. They're terrific games, and I sort of feel that one was a bit of a waste. Now, it would feel more of a waste, I think, for Bohs. Now they ended up with 0 points out of it, and James Talbot got an injury at the end when his foot got stuck in the mud, basically. So I just think if you're trying to showcase, I mean, Niall Quinn was there, all the new FAI hierarchy were there. Like, we have a certain amount of like high quality occasions and games in our league to showcase what we can do.
Little kid in the Norwegian scarf, he doesn't look too impressed there.
But we have a high caliber of games, and we can't have people coming away from the game going, well, that wasn't very good.
Jack Byrne, by all accounts, was the star of the show, or at least by Stephen Bradley's.
Jack Byrne, he tried to keep playing in the conditions. Gary O'Neill was good. Ferrugia came on and did quite well. I mean, even from Bohs, there was some good individual displays. I mean, Chris Twardek was decent for a new signing. But again, like, to analyse the game in any great depth, I mean, it was just a battle on a pitch that's probably going to be ruined now for a period of time.
You were talking to Detzer afterwards. It was a battle that he would have loved.
Derek Pender, he would have relished it. Yeah, he would have, like the early stages of like Saving Private Ryan, where it's just bodies and like everything. He would have like relished that sort of challenge.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, I don't know. It just left a bit of a sore feeling. But I mean, it was 1-0. We have a sort of goal famine as a general team.
I mean,
it was like the old Northern Irish sports results that they would read out after the match, except it was 1-0 replacing 0-0.
Yeah. It looked a dreadful game in Turner's Cross by all accounts.
Corners and mistakes. That was the team.
Corners and mistakes. Finn Harps pulled the old trick out of the bag of the right back or whoever pulls for the corner, he swings it to the back post. They've done this, they did that against Drogheda last season, and it happened again against Sligo. These are the results from the first week. Obviously that win for Finn Harps, just a massive start for Ollie Horgan, because I've been saying, Dan, like, I don't think Harps is going to get relegated, but I'm not sure who will.
But that's the problem. I mean, Cork...
Isn't there a lovely look to this table? There's 1-0 everywhere.
No.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
It doesn't actually scream entertainment when you see it.
Do you know? Remember when your man used to do the BBC? It was like 1-0, and he would have had a field day here because you only had to do two, like, up and down.
Yeah.
0-1.
But I think you're sort of flailing a bit if that is your justification for what defines a good weekend.
An average wait of over 72 minutes for a goal in each game, and that was it.
A lot of late goals. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, with Cork, apparently there was some promising signs in parts of the game, but they still lost.
They had so many new players. I didn't. It just looked a totally.
It's very hard to predict. I mean, Sligo Rovers think we're disappointed. They'd be disappointed, but that.
Bucko disappointed with the pitch.
Yeah. Although I don't know. I spoke to people who we were chatting to people at the game who said the conditions weren't deplorable, like they've seen it worse up there. So I don't know, Dundalk, I mean, I haven't really spoke too much about Dundalk. They got the job done. That was actually probably a decent standard of a 1-0 game. It was actually quite entertaining, particularly after half time. I felt there was a bit, give and take from either side. The game could have swung either way, and they were good.
What do you make of Derry, actually?
They were decent. I think Derry, as much as they've lost Parkhouse and Junior, Tim Nielsen come in, Norwegian striker, looks like he'll cause problems.
What was our Nielsen rating for week one?
Nielsen rating, we'll go for 7.
Yeah. Decky was talking like he'd found this unbelievable striker after the game. I said, hold on, Decky, he hasn't even scored yet.
Well, I mean, it's early days, but he seems confident. If any part actually suggested he'd been on their radar as well. So even, I mentioned Lupano, but even so Conor McCormick, Conor Clifford, good players. But I mean, Sloggart was decent for Dundalk as well, and no surprise, they're going to be fine.
Lots of chat about Cammy Smith.
Yeah, he was good. I didn't think he was outstanding. I thought at times they were actually struggling to find a way to get him into the game, and Conor McCormick stuck pretty tight to him, and at times the dog had to just clip it long, and it wasn't necessarily like free flowing at times. But he comes with a great pedigree. He's meant to be a smashing player from people who've seen him in full flow. So I would assume that will come to fruition over time.
And of course, the main aspect of the whole thing is that the First Division returns on Friday night after a wait of many, many months. Exciting times, Dan, if you're a Drogheda United Go United fan. It's great to be back. Only a week ago, we didn't really know what the fixtures were. Shamrock Rovers, the second, are there. So the second tier
Shamrock
is back.
Rovers, well, you need to think of an acceptable name. Shamrock Rovers 2.
Shamrock Rovers 2, yeah.
But then that day, it looks like they are going to be in it. I think the First Division teams are going to basically play them under protest, effectively. And Longford are up first on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, Drogheda, I think, are the team still in the box seat. I mean, they've been the outstanding team over the last couple of seasons in terms of performance relative to resources. And I do think they've brought in a bit more experience this year, a bit more know-how. You know, Derek Prendergast, people who sort of know the terrain, and it might just be their time. You're going to say it's Galway's time, I'm guessing. But
yeah, it's just great that it's back. I suppose as somebody who would follow a First Division team, it's disappointing that as much as, you know, the coverage is going to be down, it's still there are a lot of very good players there, and I think the exposure just sadly isn't there, and that's what disappoints me. I think you know, we could, even if we had like an online goals roundup or something like that, there is a lot of quality there.
There is good players. I mean, as I said, facilities aren't always the best thing to showcase. You can say that about the Premier Division 2 as well. That's the only slight problem.
After the break, Shane Supple, the former Bohemians keeper, is going to talk week 1. Welcome back for part 2 now, when Shelbourne and Bohemians face off on the 6th of March. Shane Supple will be returning to the Air Sports screens, and he's joined us for part 2. Sups, how are you keeping?
Good.
Yeah. What did you make of week 1? We have to start with Brian Murphy.
Yeah.
He's back. He's been away. He's done very, very little. He's probably earned decent money sitting on a bench.
Probably, there's no probably about it.
He's earned very, very good money. And he came back Friday night and was like, actually, yeah, you were the best keeper in the league, and you could well still be the best keeper in the league. He was brilliant for Waterford. What was it like for you in terms of, he was coming back? He replaced you at Ipswich, did he?
Yeah, he actually did. Yeah, when I left that time in 2009, I think Roy Keane signed him.
10 years ago.
Keane, yeah. Nuts, he tried to get me to come back and join Bows either way, but I wasn't for coming back playing then. But I never actually saw Brian play, to be honest. I'm looking forward to seeing him play. I won't be down in Waterford now this weekend. I'll probably go to Shells instead. But yeah, looking forward to seeing him play. And obviously it's great for him going back to or playing against his own club where he was a legend there.
The great thing for Rennie, Dan, as well, Rennie's trying to cobble together a squad, and he's probably like you don't really need the cash. Just come down and you can actually play a few games this year. You know.
Is that a semi-impression there?
No. We had to Rennie, but he was basically.
Well, I think he had family reasons for wanting to come back, and he's from the area, which is helpful. You know, I mean, that's obviously a selling point. I think there might be other clubs that would be still thinking, you know, could we have sort of pushed the boat out there a small bit, because it is a strange one. Like, his career arc has been unusual. It's very hard to have a go at him for what he did, because I mean, it's very easy for us to sit here and sort of, like, you know, and judge it. I mean, I remember,
he was professional.
Yeah, of course.
He turned up for work. He did his job. If you were called on, he played. He didn't.
Yeah, like around 10 years ago, before he left, he actually did say, if I want to go back to England, I want to play, because he'd been away before. And then he went back over. He did play for Ipswich at a time, because I actually did see him. I went over and I saw him play when Roy Keane was there, and he had a run for around a season or so. But he just ended up moving into this cycle around QPR and Cardiff, where it is like a lucrative circuit for the backup keeper, and they still have to. I mean, I'm sure, you know, when you're a keeper, you know, your day-to-day training and your rapport with your number 2 or your number 3, like, you still need them to be coming to training with the right attitude, and they have something to do. But at the same time, I mean, it's definitely a decision that someone takes at a particular time to say, you know, this is too good for me to refuse, even if it doesn't necessarily mean playing.
What would you have done, subsection? So it's like, I'll offer you 3 times the money you're on, but you're not playing. Or I'll offer you, you know, whatever you were on.
I wasn't playing at the time.
Yeah, but you weren't on 3 times the money.
Yeah, no,
it's like,
I like, for me, you know, even when I came back, certain teams playing GA or that, even playing with Dublin at the time, I wasn't playing. So after that year, I stepped away because I knew I wasn't getting in near Cluxton. So, like, I want to play games. It's a short career. But again, I'm never going to judge anyone on that. It's each to their own, and it's, you know, I wasn't in that situation where, you know, you're earning, you know, serious money. So who knows? But I'd like to think I would have looked to play more, so whatever level that was at. But again, I wouldn't judge anyone on it.
It was a worrying moment, obviously, for Bowes in the Rovers game, that Talbot basically got badly injured, or at least he looked badly injured in the goal, and he went off the pitch with crutches. So I don't think it's quite as bad as it might have been.
No, it's not. I don't think. A couple of weeks probably, and I suppose they're lucky enough as well. They've brought in a good backup this year, and Stephen McGuinness, who's, you know, very experienced as well. So they'll have him. He'll step in, and, you know, he could end up holding on to the shirt for a while. But yeah, it wasn't good at the time. I actually didn't realise, so as soon as the goal went in, I left the ground. So I was like, oh. Well,
just,
then
just went.
Yeah, before it all kicked off, thank God, in the end. But yeah, I was talking to James later on about it to see how bad it was, but he was getting scans and they all were clear, I think. So it's just a strain.
What about the big man, Aaron Green, in his ear telling him he was going to drop one? A bit of history there as well, which I quite liked.
Yeah, well, obviously, last year James said a few things that probably in hindsight he wished he didn't say, and gave a bit of ammunition to the Rovers fans and players. But yeah, it wasn't a great day for keeper anyway. I was watching.
What you make of it?
Like, it was not a great spectacle. It was compelling watching, but I think there's certain elements of the game, especially early on. The referee, it's getting the yellows out early in a derby. I think just assessing the day that's in it and the game that's in it, maybe. It ruined Keith Buckley in particular, his yellow card early on. It kind of just ruined his game for him because he couldn't play his normal game, getting stuck in. And Jack Byrne, ran the show for much of the first half. And Keith just couldn't get near him for that reason as well. So
yeah, we have Andy Lyons there, obviously, Dan. He was one of the players who obviously had to step up to the plate. And I was thinking this after the game. Rovers lost a lot of big games because of indiscipline, and their discipline was really poor 2 or 3 years ago, and they've worked on that, blah blah blah. But this was possibly a game where I'm not sure what happened with Lyons because they obviously couldn't see what happened. But the inexperience of maybe a player to get 2 yellows.
Like, he got a yellow for diving early on. Now, I was quite close to the incident. It was one of those ones where I can probably see why the decision was made, but there was early yellows being given. I thought his momentum was probably taking him down anyway to a degree. It wasn't a penalty, but anyway.
He looks there like he's accepting the situation.
Yeah, like he was. The second one I thought was a yellow. Yeah. It was a foul on Graham Burke and he caught him, and it was one of those ones where, yeah, I guess if you're on a yellow and you're a young player and you pick up a second one, you'll just say it's inexperience. But I think it was, conditions, a few things. Like he's a great talent. Lyons. It's actually going to be a big year for him because he had proper interest over the winter, didn't go away, but is probably one of those that is very much going to be on the shopping list for clubs that are coming over. He's a young right back with great overlapping ability and the potential to be a very good player. I wouldn't be going to 10 on him for it. Like, he's probably learned something from it, but it wasn't, a sort of he let his team down sort of type thing, but like Bohs, I mean, it's like, it is still a recurring theme with Bohs that they are still reliant though on those younger players. Although their squad is deeper this year, they're still relying on young players to become more consistent across the season if they're going to challenge. And I mean, you mentioned it, Derek Pender wasn't involved. This man here has stepped away. Like, that experienced core in the dressing room, you are reliant on Bucko probably now and Rob Cornwall and these players, because otherwise, I mean, Danny Mandry was on the bench. He wasn't.
What's going on there? Actually, that was the one thing that surprised me.
For whatever reason, he wasn't picked.
I don't think Danny's had a great pre-season by all accounts. Some of the games I've seen and that, so I think that was probably the reason.
That's got to be mental in some shape or form. Because
you can look at this young lad, and last year, got a lot of plaudits. Last year, maybe coming in as a bit of a hangover from last season. So
Chris Forrester didn't start for Pats either, which was another sort of talk.
Chris had his own issues last year as well. So like, there's a lot of quality in the league. But some of these kind of marquee players, or luxury players, if you want to call them that, there may be surplus to requirements at time for certain games and that, and obviously the conditions wouldn't. They brought Danny on late on in the game and he just came on. Andy Lyons gets sent off, so you're nearly better off taking Danny off the pitch then, because it's a totally different aspect to the game for Bohemians then. So it's just picking the players in the game, and Keith obviously felt that Wardy was the right one for that game.
You saw both teams at the weekend, Rovers and Dundalk. Did you get any sense of where they're at versus each other this stage?
It's hard. I mean, like, the first game of the season.
One of them was playing in all weather, and one of them was playing in a couple of
years ago. Just remember, a couple of years ago, Dundalk and Bray drew 0-0 in the opening weekend of the season. Dundalk scored a record amount of goals that season. I think Bray conceded a record amount.
I actually backed Dundalk that night.
Yeah, well, they were in trouble from that point onwards. Yeah. I'm wary of, like, opening day, making a definitive judgment off the back.
Can I get your definitive judgment on week one anyway?
Well, no, like, I think they are going to be the two challengers. I think the one thing that was noticeable about both games, really, Dundalk, again, they were missing 5 players, I think, on Friday. They were still able to bring on Jordan Flores, bring on Will Patching from Man City. Sean Hoare was able to come on late. Brian Gartner was an unused sub, and that's missing 4 or 5 players. Similarly at Rovers on Saturday, when they were stepping up the pressure, they were still able to bring on Ferrugia, able to bring on Dylan Watts, who was a first choice player at Bohs before. That will tell as the slog, as the games, the grind builds up, that when they're in trouble in games. Even now, we've got Friday, Monday this weekend, for example. Like, those teams are very well equipped to manage that. others will find it a bit harder to do so.
That's the thing as well. So Bows have to make the trip to Waterford, who obviously Bows could suddenly have quite a wobbly start to the season. They've lost their first game, but Waterford is going to be a bit of a challenge as well on Friday.
Yeah, especially after the result they had on Friday night, which you probably weren't expecting. Expecting maybe Pats to come out on top there at home, but Waterford will take a lot of momentum going into that game, and it'll be a full house, you'd imagine, down there on Friday. So it's a difficult one for Bows after the result on Saturday, and things may be a little bit down this week after Derby defeat, which they always are. So yeah, it'd be a tricky one, and that's the thing about these, first game of the season. Rovers, massive momentum, 93rd minute winner, that can kick them on. Aaron Green as well, who probably didn't score as many goals last year as the chances he had, that could give him, because it's important, because they don't really have a main striker in Rovers. I think that's one thing that they will miss, or they are missing, to really challenge Dundalk this year again. So it could give them a massive boost. Waterford a massive boost, who we expected, or I expected, to possibly be down around the bottom this year.
I actually, now Rennie would argue they have a very small squad, but there's no way they're going to get relegated with that team on Friday, because they can only improve. But a team I still would worry for, despite the fact they won the first game, is Shelbourne. Apparently not much happening in Turner's Cross. Kieran Kilduff, by the way, did you see the wedding celebration that was interrupted by Kieran Kilduff?
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff. Check it out on YouTube or on Twitter if you haven't. But I really fear for Shells on Friday against Dundalk.
I think at Shells,
Talca will be rocking now, having said that.
Yeah, absolutely. But Shells, a lot of the games last year, 1-0 wins. So they have kept clean sheets.
How's your buddy Morrow enjoying the first?
Yeah, he's loving it. It was great. I was speaking to him the next morning. He was delighted. It wasn't the greatest game in the world, he admitted that. But it's hard, because pre-season is a tricky one for Premier Division teams, because the quality games you're getting in pre-season are not that great. You're playing First Division teams more often than that, unless you're Dundalk, you're going abroad and playing like Seclusion and that. But majority of teams don't have a clue where they're at until, and I know from playing, it took me 3 to 4 games to get my eye really in, and that's has been the case, and will be the case for a lot of these teams, to figure out what it's all about. A lot of new players have come in, so it's going to take a couple of games to really see where teams are.
I'd worry for Cork, Dan, as well.
I understand it. I do take your point. There is no outstanding team that's going to finish bottom. I still think, Harps won at the weekend. They've got some good players, but they are very part-time outfit. And I still think when you get to that run of games, when you have X amount of games in 24 days, and they have to travel, they have long journeys and stuff, that's going to be difficult. Cork, I just don't know.
If they go to Tal on Friday.
Yeah, Cork, and then they play Dundalk on Monday. So they could easily end up with 0 points from 3 games, and maybe not having played that bad in any of the matches. But he's taken a punt on a lot of players from outside the league. I saw one of them being quoted, I think it was Rayon Dillon being quoted about coming in and saying, God, the standard's a bit higher than I thought. And I think he'd previously played in something like the 9th tier in England or something. So, you wonder, do they know exactly all know what they're coming into? Now, they sit at a big crowd at the weekend, and people will stick with them to a point, but it can be pretty volatile in Cork too. And if they have a big run of games, I think he's more likely to come under pressure, Neil Fenn, than the other managers down there, just purely because of the size of the club that he's in charge of. Regardless of the mitigating factors and budgetary issues, there will be pressure if they're down towards the bottom, that maybe even Rennie and a few others might have a bit more understanding. Ollie Horgan, I think, with Cork, is probably likely to be a bit of a different discussion. And
just briefly, so Sligo plays St. Pat's, obviously. Derry and Finn Harps, obviously the big local derby for round 2, and you'd imagine the Brandywell's going to be rocking, because they had a decent performance against Dundalk, even if they lost.
Yeah, they've done well against Dundalk down through the years last season. I think they were a bit of a bogey team for them, took a good few points off them. So Derry again, you'd be looking at them, 3rd or 4th this year. You'd be challenging for Europe again. So Decky's brought in a couple of players, Parkhouse and Junior are gone. They were a big force last year, and as the season went on, they got a lot more comfortable in the team, and Parkhouse started, scoring a lot more goals in the team. So it's hard to replace those kind of guys, but no doubt Decky has done his homework and got a good side in. So it'll be a tough task for Finn Harps up there on Friday night, definitely.
Do stay tuned on for YouTube and obviously for the podcast. But just before we do go on Airsport 1, we are delighted to announce 3 live games coming up in March. Our cameras will be in Dalymount Park on Friday, March 6th for Super Subs. He's back, Bows against Shells in the Dublin Derby. Following night, we'll have live coverage of Sligo Rovers against Shamrock Rovers from the showgrounds. And on Friday, March 13th, Friday the 13th, we will be at the home of the champions to see Dundalk against St. Patrick's Athletic, with Stephen O'Donnell returning to Oriel Park. All of those games are live on Airsport 1. Thanks very much for coming in, lads. Stay tuned if you are on YouTube or on the podcast. Otherwise, we'll see you next week when we'll be discussing the 2nd and 3rd round of games and looking forward to the 4th. So welcome back to all the Proper League of Ireland degenerates who stay tuned for the whole show, the podcast, the old podcast, Dan, as it was.
Yeah.
It used to be a long-running affair at times, an hour, an hour and 10, an hour and 15.
Now it's shorter. But if
Now it's shorter.
if there was a particularly
evocative subject.
Well, if people wanted to visualise what it looked like when we were talking to each other, they now have the facility to see that happening. Because we didn't, it was always sometimes a bit more relaxed.
Gone with Farah again. You really are looking for sponsorship.
Yeah, that's just like,
it's
a come and get me, please. It's come and get me, please, or a 2-for-1 deal. It's one or the other. I'm not sure which one it might be.
It's questions time.
Questions from our readers,
from our readers and followers.
Yeah.
First one is from Mervyn Feely. Where do you think the goals are going to come from for Pats this season? This reminds me of another Pats fan who just said, "Why do you always disappoint me?"
Yeah.
Which was that was a Manson song, was it?
I'm not
I'll
sure.
always let you down.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a team that can run through a lot of lives.
It's early days for St. Pat's.
But it is true, though, like we talked about it last week.
Where are the goals going to come
The
from?
hope that exists at the start of the season, and you convince yourself that your team, whoever it might be, this is going to be a better year. And then on the opening night, you're walking away after a defeat and you're thinking, here we go again. So where are the goals going to come from?
Billy King.
King.
They love him already.
Yeah.
I think he was
Great,
playing.
potential
King
to be
Billy.
a great nickname if it goes well.
Absolutely.
But if it goes badly, it's just good, Martin Rennie.
Rennie up top on his own struggles, but he obviously does look like he's something about him. But he struggled in the game. He's his first proper League of Ireland game. Other than that, I mean, they don't have an abundance of options.
Well, Darren Markey, they lost Markey in the warm-up last week. Now, I think he's a very creative player. I really like Darren Markey. And, again, it may well be that they're going to have to spread the goals around rather than rely on this figure. Now, I think they're obviously hoping that Rennie was going to sort of take flight and adapt to the league. But it's very hard, on the basis of one game, you don't think you can make a...
He lacks a yard. He definitely lacks pace. That's fairly obvious. But he does look like an intelligent player, and it's going to be difficult for him. The one player who really impressed me was Luke McNally at the back for Pats. I just thought he was absolutely cruised through the game. He's only 19 maybe.
I think he's turning 20. But
20.
I was looking last week into the young players to watch in the league, and that name came up in a couple of places. I mean, Tim Clancy, who had him at Drogheda last year, pretty much thinks he's going to be the best player in the country. Or the best prospect in the country, I think, by the end of this year, which is a big boast. He's a versatile defender. He can score. He scored a hat-trick in a game last year from defence for Drogheda. Maybe just stick him up top, Gary Doherty.
They're going to do that. He will be. He's so tall. He's going to be. He's definitely going to be a contender for goals. Pats, would you fear for them goals-wise?
Possibly. There's one man there you haven't mentioned. Obviously, he didn't start the other night, but he knows the league inside out and can score a goal. Chris Forrester. If they can get him right, there's definitely goals there. But
he did a great job when he came on. I was surprised he didn't start, but I don't know.
I just don't know what's happened in pre-season. You say, with teams and how pre-season has gone for certain players. So Stevie's obviously picked what he felt was the best 11 going out there. But it'd be interesting for Pats. I thought they'd be a lot more changed than what they were looking at the starting 11. When Stevie went in there, I think he cleaned out a few, but he brought Brendan Clark back in, who had kind of been ostracised, I thought, and he started the game, and a few other familiar names around there that I thought maybe
goalkeepers union stick together, don't they?
Well, fair play to Brendan Clark, because he could have hopped ship and he said, listen, I'm going to just put my head down, and then he ends up starting.
That's it. Well, I suppose a bit of maturity there as well from Brendan. He's an experienced, keeper and professional, so he wouldn't have thrown his dummy out of pram too much, I don't think.
Yeah, no, it is a credit to him, and as I said, sometimes maybe it's natural that a manager wants to move players on as part of a process, but maybe then you get into pre-season, you realise actually this person is still a massive asset. The one thing I would say about Pats is quite interesting over the off-season that they have tied down some good 16, 17-year-olds onto full-time deals. Ben McCormack, Dara Burns, and they're names that I think are going to come on the radar. I would have thought it'd be later in the season, maybe next season, but you never know if things are sort of they need a bit of a boost. They might be fast tracked. Ben McCormack in particular was excellent for the Irish under-17s last year. I think he was out of his age group then, so he's a name to remember for sure.
Here's one from Marmy Lades. Who do you reckon will be the best new foreign import into the league in 2020? Well, there have been quite a few, Dan. Probably more than I can ever remember. A lot of them are actually not signed, they're just on loan, but...
It's very hard to know to say who's going to be the best at this point. I mean, this Serbian guy that Dundalk have signed, Stefan Kolovic, I'm looking forward to seeing him play, purely because it's a very different kind of signing. I mean, they've paid a transfer fee to a club from Serbia to bring in a player, which is unusual. It's normally, a free agent or someone who's sort of sent, their agent has sent a load of YouTube videos or whatever and hoping to get picked up. So, I mean, Vinnie Park did go out there to watch him and other players. So, you'd imagine you'd expect them to be pretty decent. But then, a couple of the loanees, the Derry lad, Tim Nielsen, I mentioned the Derry lads. I know he was, again, I mentioned him earlier on, he's not new to the league. In fact, he was at Millwall, but Twardek for Bows I thought was decent last week.
I was really impressed with him. Obviously saw him a bit last year with Sligo, but
he's one of the weirdest accents I've ever heard. Like he sounds vaguely Northern Irish, but he's Canadian, but he's been all over Europe. And
but he was in Millwall as well for a period of time.
That was
so the little known Canadian Millwall crossover.
He's pace anyway.
He does, and he put himself about the other day against Rovers. Some of the tackles he put in, and he was really the one that was driving the game forward and Bows forward at the time, and then the sending off obviously changed things as well. But I was really impressed with him and the other day, and he'll be hopefully a big player for them this season.
Yeah, I think Alan Reynolds really likes Ali Coote at Waterford. He's the midfielder who's on loan. I think he's Scottish. And he was decent as well. And as I mentioned, Cammy Smith earlier on too. So
it will be interesting though. There's a lot of foreign players in the league this year. Cork in particular brought a lot in. It'll be interesting to see how they gel, because it is tricky. More often than not, a lot of them haven't taken to the league too well. You might get the odd one or two that have come in, but I don't know, to bring in a whole cohort of players for the one team and not understanding or knowing what the league is about, maybe not played a whole lot of first team football.
But
I'd be worried about that for Cork.
Neil Fenn isn't a proven manager to my mind. Neil Fenn has essentially managed at Longford Town. They didn't get promoted. Now, they did fine, but Neil Fenn is an unproven manager, so this is going to be a challenge for him.
Well, there's a lot of unproven managers in the league. Ian Morris, Stevie O'Donnell, so it's a big year for those
They're
lads.
even less proven.
But it's a different dynamic in a dressing room. I again was working on a piece this week about Derry, that they've signed a guy called Musa Bakayoko, who's basically from the Ivory Coast, last played in Armenia, and basically he's more French speaking than English speaking now. Turns out Danny Lupano.
I'm not sure either helps in Derry, but anyway.
Yeah, well, there's Derry English, so I just watched the box set of Derry girls just to get up to speed. But
that maybe could do that.
But Danny,
here's your 2 week initiation.
Cultural initiation. But Danny Lupano, the guy from Hull who I mentioned earlier, who's on loan, he actually grew up in Belgium. So it's actually 2 French-speaking lads who've become apparently quite good pals that are living in a house in Derry together. Now it's unusual, but I'd say, I don't know, you probably didn't experience so much of it at Bows, but I think sometimes you've spoken about like the atmosphere in the League of Ireland dressing room that you liked at Bows. It was almost like a club, like a GAA club mentality. Naturally, it's going to be different if you're bringing in people from different nationalities and backgrounds and who are only here for 6 months. So it's a challenge for the managers, I think, and the players to actually integrate them all in and create in a short space of time.
Especially in certain clubs, the regional clubs in particular. I think Derry as well, there's a certain culture maybe up there that maybe not everyone can buy into or enjoys, and typically down in Cork as well, there's a certain, Cork tend to do well when they have more Cork players in the team. How are those players going to take to the fans and the stick? Maybe that'll come with it if things are not happening for them. So
it's a big season as well for Andrea Wright, the Bows player, who I quite liked last season, the bit I saw of him, but Bows need somebody other than Dinny obviously scoring goals.
Dinny, you're going to be missing Dinny more often than not for a chunk of a season. Over the last couple of years it's happened, and Andre stepped up last year, probably didn't get enough goals, so it'll be interesting to see where the goals will come from if Dinny's not available, with Danny Mandrew not starting the other day. Can Chris Twardek, chip in with a few goals, and there's a couple of other younger players there maybe that can step up. But it's probably a worry as well for Keith that Dinny again is struggling with injury so early in the season.
Definitely, yeah. This one is Cork City related from Killian Whelton. What do Cork City need to do to get back to the early 2017 Cork City?
Bring back Shani Maguire.
Yeah. Well, bring back about 10 players anyway.
Kind of time machine is the answer there, which is not something they can really manage.
No, not on
it's a rebuilding phase for them, as we talked about it before. Like, it's such a massive club. Still had the biggest crowd last week.
That's not going to last, though.
No, I know it won't. But there is obviously that sort of large sort of passive support or latent support that's there, and that's just my slight fear about the thing that, preaching understanding that this is a transition. Like, if Cork are down in 7th, 8th, 9th, and it might be perfectly reasonable that they're in that position because of where the club is at, but I just think that it's natural there'll be more impatience there. And there's obviously been talk about the Preston situation. They had to sell the clauses on Alan Brown and Sean Maguire by necessity. within a couple of seasons of having won a Champions League.
This should never have happened.
Won a league and getting the Champions League.
This should never
money.
have happened. And I'm not saying it's because it's a fan-owned club or because it isn't, but this should never have happened. I mean, there shouldn't be in a situation where they went from, as much as I've criticised John Caulfield in some respects in terms of the way they played, but he had them at a decent standard, a very good standard for most of it. There's no way they should go from that to this so quickly.
And they obviously budgeted badly by putting all the Champions League money into the budget.
They had too many players.
Then they signed badly. And what's really annoying is that with Brown and Maguire, they actually had good clauses. There's a lot of reporting about, as far as I understand, it's pretty solid that the Brown one was 12.5% and Sean Maguire was 15% above the transfer fee they received from him. So, they were really good deals. That was smart business sense. The people who were there at the time protected the club's position, which is what we're talking about. You should be doing now with players that go. And okay, they've had to do it. I don't think they had an option but to do this now. But that's just so bloody frustrating, because it's not as if they're a team that's been in the wilderness. They've actually had arguably one of the best decades in the history of football in Cork, which is pretty turbulent as it is. And yet at the end of it, they've ended up in this predicament. So. And again, I think with the amount of players they've had to bring in from outside and whatnot, I just fear it could be a tough year for them. And there's I think there's a degree of fan unhappiness down there, which is at odds with the great fairy tale story of the fan-owned club that pulled itself up from the ashes, really. So, yeah, I don't see, to answer sort of that sort of query, I don't know what they can do to get back to it. I think they're just going to have to suffer through a difficult year or two and hope, that they can somehow get going again. But it's very hard to answer it when the Dundalk Rovers, for example, it's hard to see them coming back in the manner that Cork have come back.
Yeah, I want to just mention Bow is a fan-run club. There were reports of some of the chanting at the game on Saturday, which disgusted me, quite frankly. Especially in the week that was in it, Bow was on about welcoming refugees and so forth to games, and Rovers doing work with the Provision Centre this week to bring people to the game in Tala. But I wasn't at the game, so I don't know if this were one or two yobs or what it was. But what happened?
Yeah, no, I heard it, and it's a handful of.
This was obviously aimed at the Rovers goalkeeper.
I think some of it was aimed at Alan, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was.
And it's not good enough.
We can talk about an All-Ireland League. We can talk about all this. We can talk about blah blah blah.
Holding that whole thing back as well, and that's the issue it brings with it. But these people need to be banned from the club. They absolutely need to be banned from the club. They're not fans. And anything like that happens, it's hard to police it because of obviously resources and that, and to manage that. And
you say they're not fans though. They could well be fans who think that it's acceptable to.
Yeah, no, they're not. They are fans.
They may be fans who think it's acceptable to shout sectarian abuse at an opposition player if he plays for Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah.
Now, this goes on in countries all over the world, but I don't want it to happen in Ireland.
No, none of us do. I said we're trying to bring the game forward now. We're in a position where things are hopefully looking up, and this is just pulling it back again. Everyone loves bad news, and the media outlets, all that. It's all out there, and it's all the bad stories and what happened. The incidents after the game outside the ground, and that as well. So we don't need that negativity around the place. It's week one, and we're talking about this kind of stuff, and it's not what we want to be talking about, unfortunately. But it did happen, it shouldn't happen, and it needs to be dealt with, and the clubs need to do more on that.
In a more positive spin on things, just the games on Friday night, I have to say, really looking forward to just good crowds. I think at these games coming up.
I think
Derry playing Harps, obviously we get a good crowd.
Derry Harps, I think the Shells Dundalk event, I think
could be a really good crowd in Tolka. I'd love to be in Tolka for that game.
And Tala, but you're too busy working with the horses.
A big away support.
You're too much of a mercenary figure.
This is it. But a big crowd in Tolka Park. Dundalk as well. It's a fairly handy trip down the M1.
But there'll be a big crowd in Tala, I think, and even Sligo St. Pat. I think week
Watford
2
won their first
has
game.
the potential, and Waterford, I must say, did a really good. They've made a really good gesture in terms of their shirt sponsor this year, that they've paired up or raising the issue of cardiac care in Waterford, which is a very sensitive issue down there, because there's just not enough provision there for it to deal with that emergency. So I think that goodwill gesture will probably bring some people out there too. So I think it has the potential to be a much better week 2 than week 1, and hopefully with a few more goals. We should mention the first division as well. Hopefully the teams there can sort of kick off on a positive note and find that having Shamrock Rovers 2 in their division isn't really an obstacle to anything.
Nobody cares anymore. I mean, it's just let's
people
get on
are indifferent to that. I think it's more a case of those first division clubs need to create a better environment themselves, rather than worrying too much about who the away side is.
Who do you fancy to win the first division?
I just think that Drogheda have they've a very good management team there who have managed to keep a lot of their better players and add a bit more experience. And I can see the argument for Galway. I can see the argument for Longford. There's cases that can be constructed, but I think that Drog's sort of consistency, I think it might be their turn.
So
yeah, I'd go along with that. I'd love to see Galway up there as well.
Everyone loves a trip to Galway.
Well, we do, yeah. Great club, Shop Street, great spot. But yeah, I'd love to see them up there. It'd be great to have Galway challenging and potentially back in the Premier League. And it's a nice little stadium up there as well. And they're trying to do things right. I know they've had their difficulties over the last couple of years, but yeah, it'd be nice to see them up challenging for a change.
It's good to get lapsed fans like Johnny back to Galway.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you very much for listening and watching week 2. Really, really looking forward to the games at the weekend and obviously on Monday night. And we'll be back next week on Air Sport 1, on YouTube and on the podcast as ever.